This is the VOA Special English Development Report. More than 3 billion people are at risk from indoor air pollution because of the heating or cooking fuels they use. Most live in Africa, India, and China. They use biomass fuels like wood, crop waste, animal waste, or coal. These solid fuels may be the least costly fuels available, but they are also a major cause of health problems and death. For more than 30 years, the Aproveccio Research Center has been designing cleaner, low-cost cooking stoves for the developing world. Dean Still is the director of the group, which is based in the United States. He notes a World Health Organization estimate that more than 1.5 million people a year die from breathing smoke from solid fuels. Mr. Still says, and half of the people on planet Earth every day use wood or biomass for cooking. These are the people on Earth who have less money, and the richer people use oil and gas. It's been estimated that wood is running out more quickly than oil and gas. And so it is very important for the poorer people to have very efficient stoves that protect their forests and that protect their health. Every year, Aproveccio holds a stove camp at its testing station in Cottage Grove, Oregon. Engineers, inventors, students, and others come together to design and test different methods and materials for improving stoves. Over the years, the group has made stoves using mud, bricks, sheet metal, clay, ceramics, and old oil drums. Most of the stoves look like large, deep cooking pots. They have an opening at the bottom for the fire and a place on top to put a pot. Through the years, Dean Still says his group has experimented with countless stove designs. He says the goal is to make a very inexpensive stove that costs about $5. It would make very little smoke, so it would be safe for health and reduce global warming and deforestation. Aproveccio has now partnered with a stove manufacturer in China. The company is making Aproveccio's first mass-produced stoves. They are said to use 40 to 50% less wood than an open fire and produce 50 to 75% less smoke. A company called Stove Tech is selling them through its website for less than $10. Dean Still says that more than 100,000 have been sold so far. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Market researchers estimate that more than 1 billion personal computers are in use worldwide. Availability has improved in developing countries, but still remains limited compared to industrialized nations. Experts continue to debate how best to close this digital divide. Nicholas Negroponte established the One Laptop Per Child project in 2005. He would like to put a low-cost laptop in the hands of every child, especially those living in extreme poverty. His nonprofit organization has shipped its specially designed laptop to developing countries around the world. He says it is already in the hands of more than 1 million children in 31 countries and 19 languages. And one country, Uruguay, has just completed doing every single child in the country, he says. But the program has critics. They say trying to supply every child with a laptop, even at the current price of $160, is costly and inefficient. Stephen Ducker also makes low-cost computers, but his can run programs and applications for several students at once. He says these virtual desktops lower costs, reduce energy use, and lessen the need for technical support. His company, N Computing, says it has set up over 40,000 networks in more than 100 countries. Stephen Ducker says all you need to connect to a network is a keyboard and monitor. You think you've got your own computer all to yourself, he says. Instead, users are sharing the resource and doing it at a much lower cost than having their own PC. As computers reach more children in developing countries, so too in many cases is the internet. It can be a great educational tool. But children also need to learn about the possible threats that can be found on social networks and other sites. Mark Mutunga is with Microsoft East Africa in Kenya. He says poverty may put African children especially at risk. They are being told, hey, you know what? I can send you a few dollars. I can come and visit you. I can buy you a ticket. You come to my country. His company is working with the Kenyan government and a children's rights group. Mark Mutunga says the coalition is trying to educate the public about how to protect children from online abuse. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report, available on Twitter and Facebook at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. International Women's Day is celebrated every year on March 8th. Groups around the world use the day to honor the achievements of women. They also use the day to call attention to some of the major social, political, and economic crises affecting women and girls. Forced marriage, sexual abuse, poverty, and lack of education are among the leading issues. The United Nations says 1 in 5 women worldwide will be the victim of a sexual assault in their lifetime. The agency says rape and domestic violence are a major cause of death and disability among women ages 15 to 44. And it says more than 130 million women around the world have had their external sexual organs damaged or disfigured. This practice is known as female genital mutilation. Poverty, food insecurity, and access to education are also major issues affecting women. The United Nations says the majority of the world's 1.3 billion poor are women, and that women and girls in many countries lack access to education. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says until women and girls are freed from poverty and injustice, the world's goals for peace, security, and sustainable development are at risk. National Women's Day was first celebrated in the United States on February 28, 1909. It became an international celebration in 1911. A year earlier, a women's rights leader suggested the idea at an international conference of working women in Copenhagen. Clara Zetkin said women around the world should set aside one day every year to protest oppression and inequality for women. More than 1 million women and men attended events in Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland during the first International Women's Day in 1911. The date for the observation was changed to March 8th in 1914 in honor of the first organized protest for women's rights. It was on this date in 1908 that 15,000 women marched in New York City to demand better pay, shorter hours, and voting rights. Several countries now celebrate International Women's Day as a public holiday. They include China, Russia, Bulgaria, and Vietnam. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. Transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. And you can find us on Twitter and YouTube at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. The World Health Organization is using a new combination of drugs to treat human African trypanosomiasis disease, also known as sleeping sickness. The drugs nifurtimox and eflornithine will be given out in Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Officials from the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative say the new treatment has fewer side effects. It is also more effective and less costly than the drugs traditionally used. In addition, the new treatment reduces the number of injections needed, and it shortens the amount of time patients must spend in the hospital. Sleeping sickness threatens millions of people in 36 countries in Africa. Most live in poor rural areas. The disease is caused by the trypanosoma parasite. It is spread to humans through the bite of infected tsetse flies. Common signs of sleeping sickness include fever, headaches, extreme tiredness and pain in the muscles and joints. Early identification of the disease may be difficult because many infected people do not show any immediate symptoms. Over time, the parasites invade the central nervous system. The disease causes sleep disorders, mental confusion, personality changes, speech problems, seizures, and coma. If left untreated, sleeping sickness kills. The World Health Organization estimates that about 60,000 people are currently infected with the disease. It develops in two different forms. Trypanosoma gambiense is responsible for 90% of the reported cases of sleeping sickness. People infected with this form may develop the disease over many years without any major symptoms. The disease develops more quickly over a few weeks or months in people infected with Trypanosoma rhodesiense. Until now, the drug melarsoprol was used to treat patients in the advanced stage of sleeping sickness. But the drug requires many painful injections several times a day for several weeks. It also causes bad side effects, some of which can be deadly. In Uganda, a new study has confirmed earlier research linking the spread of sleeping sickness to infected farm animals. The writers of the study have called for stronger rules requiring cattle to be treated before being sold at market. The study was published in the Public Library of Science. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. The World Health Organization has begun to use a new vaccine against polio. Officials say it will become a major tool in the campaign to end a disease that mainly affects children under age 5. The new formulation is known as BOPV, or bivalent oral polio vaccine. It was used for the first time in December in a polio immunization campaign in Afghanistan. Carol Pandak is with the Polio Plus program of the service organization Rotary International. She explains that health workers have been using what are called trivalent vaccines in some places. These are areas like Afghanistan where more than one kind of polio virus exists. There are 3 types of polio virus. The trivalent vaccine is least effective against type 3, more effective against type 1, and highly effective against type 2. As a result, few new cases of type 2 have been reported since 1999. This has led to greater use of monovalent vaccines to protect against either type 1 or type 3 polio. But Carol Pandak says the monovalent vaccine is not enough in areas with both kinds of polio. Rod Curtis at the World Health Organization in Geneva says the new bivalent vaccine solves this problem. Carol Pandak says tests found the new vaccine to be 30% more effective than the trivalent vaccine. More than 30 new cases of polio were reported in Afghanistan last year. About half were type 1 and the others type 3. Rod Curtis says that shows the importance of the new vaccine targeting both viruses at once. Officials say similar vaccination campaigns are planned this year in India, Nigeria, and Pakistan. Intensive vaccination campaigns have reduced the number of new polio cases reported worldwide to fewer than 2,000 a year. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative says the number has fallen by 99% since 1988. Polio is highly infectious. The virus enters the body through the mouth, usually in food or water. It grows in the intestines and attacks the nervous system. One victim in 200 suffers permanent paralysis, usually in the legs. 5 to 10% of those victims die when their breathing muscles fail. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. You can comment on our reports at our website, voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Millions of babies and children could soon be protected against the deadly disease, pneumonia. 2 leading drug companies have agreed to supply vaccines against pneumococcal disease to the world's poorest countries at a reduced price. Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline signed the historic Advance Market Commitment Agreement in March. The Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations, or Gavi, helped negotiate the deal. The group says the low-cost vaccines could save as many as 7 million lives by the year 2030. The World Health Organization says pneumonia kills almost 2 million children each year. This is more than AIDS, malaria, and measles combined. It is the leading cause of death among young children, and more than 90% of those deaths happen in the developing world. These are all reasons why Gavi chose the pneumococcal vaccine for its first Advance Market Commitment project. The private-public partnerships are designed to increase the availability of low-cost vaccines in poor areas. Last year, the governments of Italy, the United Kingdom, Canada, Russia, and Norway joined with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They provided $1.5 billion to launch the pneumococcal vaccine project. Jeffrey Rowland is with the Gavi Alliance. He says the money helps to persuade drug makers to take part in the project. GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer are the first 2 drug companies to take part. They have agreed to provide 30 million doses of the vaccine each year for 10 years. The first 20% of the vaccines will sell for $7 a dose. The remaining 80% will cost $3.50 per dose. That is 90% less than current prices in the United States. Mr. Rowland says the agreement is a huge achievement for the developing world. He says vaccination is a life or death question for poor people. If you can vaccinate a child to prevent a disease from happening, it is a lot more cost-effective than it is to treat that disease afterwards. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. For transcripts and podcasts of our programs, along with captioned videos and a lot more, visit us at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find us on Facebook.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. A new study in West Africa shows how farm irrigation systems powered by the sun can produce more food and money for villagers. The study in Benin found that solar-powered pumps are effective in supplying water, especially during the long, dry season. Sub-Saharan Africa is the part of the world with the least food security. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that more than 1 billion of the world's people faced hunger last year. Around 265 million of them live south of the Sahara Desert. Lack of rainfall is one of their main causes of food shortages. Jennifer Burney from Stanford University in California led the study. The research team helped build 3 solar-powered drip irrigation systems in northern Benin. Between 30 and 35 women used each system to pump water from the ground or a stream. Each woman was responsible for farming her own 120 square meters of land. They also farmed other land collectively. The solar-powered irrigation systems produced an average of nearly 2 metric tons of vegetables per month. During the first year, the women kept a monthly average of almost 9 kilograms of vegetables for home use. They sold the surplus produce at local markets. The earnings greatly increased their ability to buy food during the dry season, which can last from 6 to 9 months. People in the 2 villages with the systems were able to eat 3 to 5 more servings of vegetables per day. But making the surplus available at markets also had a wider effect. The study compared the villages with 2 others where women farmed with traditional methods like carrying water in buckets. The amount of vegetables eaten in those villages also increased, though not as much. The researchers note that only 4% of the cropland in sub-Saharan Africa is irrigated. Using solar power to pump water has higher costs at first. But the study says it can be more economical in the long term than using fuels like gasoline, diesel, or kerosene. And solar power is environmentally friendly. The study was published in January in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. You can post comments and learn about other issues in the developing world at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Snakes bite an estimated 5.5 million people worldwide each year. Experts say tens of thousands of people die from venom poisoning. An untreated or incorrectly treated bite might require the removal of a foot or an arm. Each year, around 400,000 amputations are the result of snake bites. Last year, for the first time, the World Health Organization added snake bites to its list of neglected tropical diseases. This recognition aims to bring greater attention to the problem. Scientists know of about 3,000 kinds of snakes. About 600 of them are poisonous. These are most often found in rural areas in tropical climates. Asia and Africa have the highest number of snake bites, together about 4 million a year. Latin America and islands in the South Pacific follow. The highest number of victims are agricultural workers. Snake bites are also common among fishermen, hunters, and children. Many victims live in areas with poor or non-existent healthcare systems and where anti-venom treatments are often not available. Anti-venom is the only cure, but experts say anti-venom technologies and their use need to be improved. problems include a shortage of manufacturers and the high cost of treatment. Also, there is a widespread lack of knowledge among local health workers about how to use antivenoms. The treatments can cause dangerous and even deadly reactions if not used carefully. Antivenom contains proteins from animals such as horses or sheep. The animals are injected repeatedly with one or more different snake venoms to produce immunity. The Lancet Medical Journal recently published a series of reports on snakebite prevention and treatment. David Worrell at the University of Oxford in England co-wrote one of them. He praised efforts by the WHO to establish common practices for the production, regulation, and control of antivenom. But he says more must be done. The authors say community education programs could help prevent snake bites by teaching people how to avoid them. They also suggest actions like providing protective boots to wear while working in fields and not sleeping on the ground. Also important is providing information about where dangerous snakes are most likely to live and when they are most active. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Counterfeit medicines are a widespread problem in developing countries. Like other counterfeits, they look like real products. But counterfeit drugs may contain too much, too little, or none of the active ingredients of the real thing. People do not get the medicine they need, and in some cases, the counterfeits cause tragic problems of their own. About a year ago, more than 80 children in Nigeria died after being given medicine for teething pain. And more than 20 children in Bangladesh died last year after being given acetaminophen. In both cases, the medications contained ingredients that looked, smelled, and tasted like the real thing. But the medicine in Bangladesh was produced by a local drug manufacturer that used a dangerous substitute to save money. And in the case in Nigeria, an illegal chemical dealer sold counterfeit glycerin to a drug company. That company then used the chemical to make the teething medicine. The World Health Organization says the problem with counterfeit medicines is especially bad in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The WHO estimates that up to 30% of the medicines on sale in many of those countries are counterfeit. Counterfeit medications are also a problem in the Middle East and in many countries of the former Soviet Union. The problem is less widespread among industrialized countries. The WHO says counterfeits represent less than 1% of the illegal drug market in countries like the United States, Canada, Japan, and New Zealand. But the agency also says as much as 50% of the medicine sold on the internet is counterfeit. Most people have no way to tell if medications are what they seem. The Center for Medicine in the Public Interest is a group in New York supported in part by the drug industry. It predicts counterfeit sales will reach $75 billion worldwide this year, nearly double the level of 2005. Substandard medicines are also a widespread problem in the developing world. How are they different from counterfeits? The legal difference is that counterfeit drugs are made with the purpose of misleading people. Substandard drugs are just poorly made. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. Next week, learn what is being done to fight counterfeit medicines. Transcripts, podcasts, and captioned videos of our reports can be found at voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. A new report says businesses around the world are not keeping up with new and tricky methods of computer crime. The international technology company Cisco Systems released the report. It said businesses are trying to prevent computer system security breaks using old technology and policies. The report describes big mistakes businesses have made in trying to stop computer attacks. Cisco examined 115,000 devices. It says almost all of them had security weaknesses in their software. Jason Brevnick is a top engineer at Cisco Systems. He told VOA that computer criminals will attack systems owned by a company or an individual. He said criminals will work together to target a computer system and steal information. Brevnick said companies are starting to guard their computer systems continuously. This helps them identify and quickly answer attacks. He said many companies do not discover attacks until 100 days or more after they happen. However, Brevnick said new programs are able to identify attacks within hours. Tara Sinclair is with the jobs listing website Indeed.com. She says computer attacks have caused a large increase in the need for computer security experts. The company Symantec is the largest seller of security software in the world. It says the number of people needed for computer security jobs will grow to 1.5 million by 2019. Cisco's Jason Brevnick told VOA that universities are training students for the growing computer security market. For VOA Learning English, I'm Ann Ball. From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. A new report says businesses around the world are not keeping up with new and tricky methods of computer crime. The international technology company Cisco Systems released the report. It said businesses are trying to prevent computer system security breaks using old technology and policies. The report describes big mistakes businesses have made in trying to stop computer attacks. Cisco examined 115,000 devices. It says almost all of them had security weaknesses in their software. Jason Brevnick is a top engineer at Cisco Systems. He told VOA that computer criminals will attack systems owned by a company or an individual. He said criminals will work together to target a computer system and steal information. Brevnick said companies are starting to guard their computer systems continuously. This helps them identify and quickly answer attacks. He said many companies do not discover attacks until 100 days or more after they happen. However, Brevnick said new programs are able to identify attacks within hours. Tara Sinclair is with the jobs listing website Indeed.com. She says computer attacks have caused a large increase in the need for computer security experts. The company Symantec is the largest seller of security software in the world. It says the number of people needed for computer security jobs will grow to 1.5 million by 2019. Cisco's Jason Brevnick told VOA that universities are training students for the growing computer security market. For VOA Learning English, I'm Ann Ball.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. The area in Northern California, between San Francisco and San Jose, is known as Silicon Valley. Some of the world's most famous technology companies are based there. Apple and Facebook are two big ones. Along with these big established companies, there are many small companies trying to get started. These businesses are called startups. Some of the people behind startups are immigrants from countries like Sri Lanka and China. Ji Chuang and James Fong are Chinese Americans. They met at Cornell University in the state of New York. Together, they founded a startup company called Listia. Listia is an online marketplace where people can exchange used items for credit. Then they can use the credit to buy other items like collectible coins, video games, or cell phones. Listia has been in business since 2009 and has 9 million users. Poonsri Abewikrema is the founder of Cloud of Goods. He is from Sri Lanka. Cloud of Goods is an online business that connects local residents who have things to rent with tourists who need those things. He says his business is based on the fact that people often buy goods that they do not use all the time. When those goods are not being used, they can be rented to someone else. Neil Gorenflo is a business analyst for Shareable. It tracks what is called the sharing economy. He says, starting online businesses can be difficult. It can take several years to learn how to be successful, he says. For VOA Learning English, I'm Dan Friedel. From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. The area in Northern California, between San Francisco and San Jose, is known as Silicon Valley. Some of the world's most famous technology companies are based there. Apple and Facebook are two big ones. Along with these big established companies, there are many small companies trying to get started. These businesses are called startups. Some of the people behind startups are immigrants from countries like Sri Lanka and China. Ji Chuang and James Fong are Chinese Americans. They met at Cornell University in the state of New York. Together, they founded a startup company called Listia. Listia is an online marketplace where people can exchange used items for credit. Then they can use the credit to buy other items like collectible coins, video games, or cell phones. Listia has been in business since 2009 and has 9 million users. Poonsri Abewikrema is the founder of Cloud of Goods. He is from Sri Lanka. Cloud of Goods is an online business that connects local residents who have things to rent with tourists who need those things. He says his business is based on the fact that people often buy goods that they do not use all the time. When those goods are not being used, they can be rented to someone else. Neil Gorenflo is a business analyst for Shareable. It tracks what is called the sharing economy. He says, starting online businesses can be difficult. It can take several years to learn how to be successful, he says. For VOA Learning English, I'm Dan Friedel.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. UNICEF is appealing for more than $1 billion in aid for women and children around the world. The United Nations Children's Fund has released its Humanitarian Action Report for 2010. The report lists 28 countries and territories with some of the world's most pressing crises affecting women and children. Haiti was considered to be in crisis long before the earthquake in January. The Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF, Hilda Johnson, says the quake has only made the need for aid more immediate. But she says children all over the world have the right to the same assistance. The Humanitarian Action Report discusses several issues that UNICEF says increasingly threaten the basic rights of women and children. It says climate change has caused droughts and food insecurity in many areas. High food prices and the global financial crisis of 2008-2009 have only added to poverty and malnutrition. And armed conflict continues to threaten the lives of millions. Hilda Johnson says children are always the most affected by conflicts and disasters. They face an increased risk of abuse, including sexual violence and other serious rights violations. UNICEF deals with about 200 emergencies around the world every year. The greatest need last year was in sub-Saharan Africa. The report says drought, food insecurity, and civil unrest affected about 24 million people. Violence and displacements of people were especially bad in Sudan, Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Central African Republic. In Asia, UNICEF expects its financial assistance needs to more than double this year. This is partly the result of adding Pakistan and the Philippines to the latest report. In Pakistan, it says more than 2 million people have been forced from their homes by the conflict in the Swat Valley and other areas of the Northwest. And in the Philippines, more than 200,000 people are still living in shelters after severe storms last year. This year's UNICEF report talks about the value of public and private partnerships in helping children and families in emergencies. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. For a link to the UNICEF report listing the 28 countries and territories in crisis, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. The World Bank says most developing countries have made important progress toward the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. In April, the international lender released its yearly World Development Indicators. Hundreds of indicators are used to measure progress in areas such as education, health, poverty, the environment, and trade. One of the Millennium Development Goals is to reduce by half the number of people living in extreme poverty by 2015. Out of 87 countries with data available, 49 seem likely to reach that goal. Extreme poverty is defined as earning less than $1 a day. Another goal is to make education available to all young children. The report shows that in 2007, 7 out of 10 children lived in developing countries that had met or were close to meeting that goal. Also, 39 countries have achieved or are likely to achieve the goal of reducing child death rates. The target is a 2/3 reduction by 2015. And the report from the World Bank shows the first reduction in AIDS-related deaths. But even with all the progress, there is still a long way to go to reach all 8 goals approved by world leaders 10 years ago. This is especially true in sub-Saharan Africa, which falls behind on all of the goals. Eric Swanson is a program manager for the World Development Indicators. He said there was a decade or more of very slow economic progress in the 1990s in Africa. There were civil wars and other disruptions. And there was poor governance in many countries that has not permitted the economy to grow and has not allowed poor people to share in the benefits of growth. Still, he points to some hopeful signs, including a large reduction in the child death rate in Malawi. The World Bank also launched a new open data initiative. The bank will make its data on living conditions around the world publicly available. Officials say this will make it easier to measure the effects of policies and develop new solutions to help the world's poor. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. You can comment on our programs and learn about other development issues at voaspecialenglish.com. You can find transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and iTunes at VOA Learning English.